Don't you just love horror movies? I don't. That probably has something to do with the fact that the first horror movie I ever saw was VHS and I was like 11, but that's besides the point. I love movies in general, so I've buckled down and familiarized myself with the old staples of the genre. Horror history can be broken into a few primary eras in my mind. The 2000s are, in my opinion, the worst era of horror. For the most part, genuine suspense is swapped for over-the-top torture and gore, going for a more sick and fucked up factor than really scaring you. Yeah, fuck you, Eli Roth. There's an oversaturation of found footage and some shitty remakes thrown in the mix. Thankfully, the 2010s turned a corner and got us to a renaissance with the likes of Insidious, the Conjuring franchise, and later in the decade we get the genuinely talented likes of people like Robert Eggers, Ari Aster, and Mike Flanagan, coming to save us from what the genre had devolved into with genuinely good, scary movies. But before these guys came along, a little-known writer-director named Christopher Smith showed up in 2009 and blessed us with the little-known psychological horror thriller, Triangle. Triangle, as I mentioned, written and directed by Christopher Smith, is the antithesis of the movies of the era that surrounded it. Horror wasn't being given a fair chance by anyone, and I'd say rightfully so at this time, but this movie was completely overlooked at the time of its release, grossing $1.6 million against a $12 million budget. Despite a lack of true star power in the cast that might have contributed to the box office loss, I think this movie is really well acted by all of the characters, but Melissa George specifically as our main character Jess does a great job. Triangle follows Jess and a guy she's interested in as they take a little sailing trip on his boat along with some of his other friends. Their sailboat gets f***ed up by a storm, and then a much larger ship comes along to rescue them. That's all I'm really going to say though, since this is definitely a movie that it's best to go into blind, and that's why this is going to be one of my shorter videos. I can't even really just have a spoilers section because I'd have far too much to unpack, but if you listen to some of the things I have to say and you think it's for you, you'll thank me for keeping the synopsis brief if you do decide to check it out. I was hesitant to buy in at first. I thought some of the CGI was shoddy, and I thought it was a bit slow for the early portions of the movie, but everything that happens in this movie is important. I actually found myself a little frustrated at myself that I had been glancing at my phone during the early portions of the movie by the time the end credits rolled, because I knew I'd missed a few bits of information that were important, because everything that happens in this movie is important. Triangle makes no apologies for demanding the full attention of the audience and rewards you for being locked in, so put the phone down. This is also a pretty tame horror movie. I mean, I'm not even sure I'd 100% call it horror. I mean, marketing does, and the internet classifies it as a horror movie, but it's not super jump scary if you don't do well with those. So if you can do a bit of blood and gore, I think this is actually an easy watch to get behind, even if you have friends who don't want to watch horror movies with you. The mystery and suspense elements shine through a ton, and are more broken up by the horror we get than vice versa. And I think this movie's editing really helps that shine through. I don't talk about editing much. I don't know much about it apart from what I have to do for these videos here. But I do know that most of the time when you notice editing in a movie, it's a bad thing. In Triangle's case, I found myself thinking multiple times throughout the movie that the creative team was making really cool editing choices. The quality and care that was put into this movie shines through, and it's a bummer to me that it was a total box office bomb. This movie deserves so much more than that, and I'm glad it's garnered a bit of a cult following on the internet since. I am confident that Triangle, if released today under the guise of a Netflix original, would be the next Bird Box or Squid Game. Audiences are weird like that, I think. Overlooked and undersold, Triangle is exactly the type of movie I like to recommend to people on this channel. So, especially if you enjoy being in a constant cycle of confused and then rewarded every 10 minutes for about 90 minutes, this is the movie for you. That's all I've got today, though. Thanks so much if you made it this far. Click some buttons for me and send my channel to the moon. Hope to catch you again next time. Cheers.